Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions on a Sunday, 4 p.m. BST. It is Mindset Sunday, and back to the show is Emil Goliath. How you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, all good.
Eh,
Cool to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Do you want to just give the audience a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Emil. Goliath is not my surname, but
Yeah.
it suits the purpose. It's my internet name. So I am.
May I ask you where that come from?
Yeah, of course. So back in 2011, I was ex-rugby player and I wanted to compete in strongman. So to compete in strongman, I needed to gain a load of weight, and this was essentially then my project to become Goliath. So my Instagram handle, for example, is Project Goliath. And then I then became a doctor, was working as a doctor full time. And when I went back into the fitness industry as a coach, I wanted to have some degree of anonymity. So I didn't want my patients in the emergency room, Googling me when they saw my name. So I kind of changed my name on Facebook and on the internet to Emil Goliath. So that stuck.
Cool. And what was your discipline? In terms of, you got GPs and stuff. What did you study to get your name as a doctor? That those not credits after your name. It's a title after your name. I'm trying to think of the right word for it.
Oh, like honorifics, like letters.
Yes. Yeah. Letters after your name. Apologies.
Yeah. So I did a medical degree, which is kind of the standard starting place. And I also did a sports science degree, which will add another BSc after my name.
Yep.
But when I was actually practicing, I trained in anesthetics, I'm very, very interested in supplements and pharmacology from that. And then most recently, I've done emergency medicine, which allowed me a level of freedom. And I think we're going to be talking about freedom and travel and all that next week. But that's a big, big part of my life. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, today, what we're going to be talking about, our focus today really is going to be about optimizing sleep and regulating stress levels and stuff like that. So what would you like to kick off with first?
I think start with sleep. Sleep is hot topic, super important, underpins everything else. And certainly for entrepreneurs, we have this kind of sleep fast, sleep when you're dead, 18-hour hustle mentality, which is useful to, show an opposing side.
Yeah. Cool. So let's kick off with some examples. Let's talk about rituals that people should be considering before bed.
Yeah, for sure. So, I suppose first off is even just persuading people that they need to sleep more. A lot of people think, I can get by on 4 hours because Margaret Thatcher did it, or who was it? Ronald Reagan did it, and they were fine. And there's a book by a guy called Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. And he did that classical interview on Joe Rogan. If you haven't watched it yet, watch it. Joe Rogan, Matthew Walker. It's 2 hours long. And if you were in doubt as to whether you needed to sleep more, that will change your mind. It's quite extreme. It's quite like, black and white. Like this is, and I don't think in reality it's as specific as that, but it's likely that most of us need to sleep more. And certainly after listening to that interview, I quit my night shifts. I was doing predominantly night shifts in ER, and I just said, right, that's it. I'm done. No more. And that was it for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you mind if I go through some of my rituals and
Please,
then you can pick them apart and then we can move through? So some of the things that I do is that I've got earplugs, and I tested loads of different types. And what I found is the wax earplugs, which multi your ears, because the attenuation is a lot better than, like some people will sell products and they throw in these kind of really crappy earplugs and they just don't do anything. They pop out your ears and everything else. And obviously you go through a lot of them. You can buy them on eBay. I think I pay about £10 for about 60 of them. And you normally cut them in half and then you put them in, you get them molded to your ears. And I find that's been great. And I've been doing that for a good number of years, even when I'm traveling as well. When you're staying in hotels, especially if you late night, you're out, and then, the cleaners are coming in the hallways and stuff. Generally in most hotels, you get yourself positioned to be in the right place. But I've really found that the wax-based earplugs that multi your ears are much, much better than most earplugs. So I have them everywhere, at home, when I travel. The other thing that I do is eye masks as well.
Yeah.
And if you haven't got them already, blackout blinds, because a lot of people don't have like double what's it called? I'm trying to think of the word for it. When you've got with curtains, it's almost like some of them can be a bit thin if they're a lighter color, and it doesn't matter so much in winter, but in the summer it's really bad for you wake up, one little blink and that's it, you're awake and you can't get back for a few hours. So I find that eye mask's really good, and if you can get heavy weighted curtains or blackout blinds, sometimes you can buy this like a black sheet that sticks against the window. It's not very pretty, but let's just say you're moving around or you haven't got curtains sorted, you can order these off eBay for about £15. You cut it to shape, you just press it onto the glass, and it gives you the blackout there, because you've got to think about the importance of the sleep. The other thing I do is control the temperature in the room. If it's too hot in the room, it's very difficult to sleep. And it's the same with fitted clothing as well. So if you're going to wear clothing in bed, which people do, pajamas or whatever they want to wear, some people don't wear anything, and that can work out even better, but it depends on where you are, etc. But loose clothing also works as well, as long as it's not dragging round as you're turning over and the top comes with it, because it can be like too loose. Another thing is magnesium citrate. So I utilize that, and sometimes I break them down in half, 30 minutes before bed, or soak in a magnesium bath, right? Because obviously your skin is another form of absorption. So it's another one that I find is really good to kind of slow things down. Another one is air purifier. Like I've got one, I think it's about £200 or £300, and what that does, it purifies the air. So if you've got pets, and you've got to think about the purity of what's going on in the air. Even though you can't see it, it doesn't mean that the airflow is particularly pure. So we have a machine that's running all the time, and what happens, it goes up and down. So for instance, if you put deodorant on, it starts to speed up and slow down. The fans start to kick in to accommodate what's going on there to purify the air. And I found that you've got ones where you could just hoover out the filters, so you don't have to replace the filters as much getting clogged. You can just keep the same filters. I find that has been really good. Another thing I do is always put my mobile on airplane mode because of EMFs. I can't remember what was the abbreviation? Electromagnetic fields. Yeah, people don't realize how much goes on in terms of how it affects the cellular system. And obviously, if you've ever used one of you can go to Hungry House and you can hire these devices. And what happens, they scan over them like microwaves. You can hear all the static coming off them from the effects. I'm not sure if it's radiation or whatever it is, but the signal that picks up, most people plug their phone in right by the bed. And I think that's something else that can disturb your sleep. So putting that into airplane mode. The other thing is removing blue light, which I already do. I mean, trying to think, I've got Iris on my Mac while I'm sitting in front of them here. iPhone has a built-in one if you go into settings, because you want to take the blue light out as well, and also control your brightness on screen. I normally just pull it down on the front shortcuts on the iPhone, and then I bring the brightness down later in the day as well. No heavy meals before bed. One thing I'm experimenting at the moment with is snacks, so to help regulate the blood sugar, because the thing is with me, I can get to sleep really, really easy, but what happens is I wake up at 4:30 every day, so I don't have an alarm. My alarm clock is basically me just waking up at 4:30 most days, and I can't tend to get back to sleep. So what I'm going to do is try and experiment with different foods just before bed, because it might be a regulation with blood sugar. So it might be an adrenaline thing, you wake up in the middle of the night. So I still haven't kind of nailed that down on what that is. Caffeine, 6 hours before bed, none of that. No late night working in front of the screen where possible, because I find that can be quite heavy consumption before bed. And not that I do heavy workouts, but I know that heavy workouts can be a bit of a stressor on the body right before sleep. So that's about as limited as my knowledge is, but I have spent over period of time trying all different things. Ashwagandha is another thing I tried, but that has a histamine effect on me. So I get like my face will swell up under my eye here when I have a histamine reaction. So other things I've tried, and not when I'd done this when I was doing keto, which is not ideal because it knocks you out of keto, but like raw honey. That was another thing, but I'd wake up and feel absolutely exhausted, and then I'd be reaching for a coffee. So I'm on a consistent look to say, right, how can I regulate this? Because another thing, as I understand, is depending on your gut biome as well, is that for a better word, the bugs in your gut bacteria works against or with or has its own circadian rhythm. I don't know enough science behind it, and that can be a lead to those things. So as a doctor, or from your opinion, what would you say to me, to what I've just shared with you there, which could improve my sleep going past 4:30 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah, so that's interesting that you're waking up at 4:30. What do you think it is that's causing that?
I had no idea. It really did start when I'd done keto a few years ago. I think that's where I really locked in to that, and it never kind of recovered. So what is it, a hormone imbalance? I don't know enough about the science. The only thing is, with having Lyme, SIBO, and mold, that obviously that's an autoimmune thing, and so that could play a role in it. But I'm really not clear. But when you've got an autoimmune thing, that can also mess with regulation of blood sugar and stuff. So it might be when I eat, like say I finish the show, I'll go and have some steamed veg, etc. That would be like my dinner. But then if you think 5 p.m., go to bed at 10, wake up at 4:30, that's a long time to go without food as well. Now, if you're looking to do intermittent fasting, that falls into that criteria. But this is why I'm looking at maybe experimenting, having something very, very small before bed that bridges that gap from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then 10 p.m. to 4:30 a.m.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, what I would say straight off the bat is this kind of thing is going to be super, super individual. So exactly as you're doing, experimenting and figuring out what works for you is going to be the best thing to do. And ideally changing one thing at a time. So have like the basics sorted and then add one thing, see how it goes. And that might be as simple as, seeing what time you wake up, what time you go to bed, how good you feel in the day, which is a pretty good measure. Or you could go a bit further and get like an Aura ring or Fitbit to do it. Apple Watch does it. You can get the Sleep Cycle app on your phone and start to sort of gather some data. And then from there, you can start to experiment, play with things, see which ones work and which ones don't. The other thing with this kind of thing, I kind of think about, same as nutrition, start with the big winners, start with the 80-20, and then, start to layer on change. And if you're not doing the basics, if you haven't got a dark, quiet, cool room, then taking magnesium is like, a drop in the ocean. It's not going to make a difference. You need to make sure you've got the big things nailed down. So, I mean, I was taking some notes as you kind of went through that list, and we can kind of go through those and talk them through. So earplugs and eye mask. I mean, so what you're actually aiming for is quiet and darkness.
Yes.
And in relation to that temperature. Now, those are the big three that very naturally are sort of, you think cavemen.
Yeah.
These are the things that triggered cavemen to sleep. It would get dark, it would get cool, and all the animals would go to sleep, so it would get quiet, and then that would set people off. So we're very, very sensitive to this kind of stuff. Now, earplugs are great. You can use them anyway. You can, travel with them, whatever else, and they do make it quiet. Now, and I might be wrong, I've heard something about how they block the disposal of earwax from your ear. So if you use them too much, then they can cause issues. I don't know if you've heard anything about that or read about it or anything.
Well, I mean, as a child, actually, I had what was thought as hearing difficulties. It wasn't. It was just my mum, when I was 2, 3, 4 years old, clearing my ears out with earbuds. So they can actually be quite dangerous in that sense. Yeah. And then my nan noticed it. Like, I came down the stairs. She went outside as an experiment, knocked on the door. I walked straight past the door. And she said, Carol, Danny, there's something going wrong with him. It can't work it out. So I took us to the doctors. Lo and behold, basically using earbuds and then obviously having your ear syringe resolved the issue. But you're right. If you put in that's why you got to dispose of them as well. So I end up going through a set most days, but they're cheap. When you think of, if you buy 60 of them for say £10 off eBay, then you got like a 2-month supply, maybe a bit longer than that. It's 2 months because they come quite large. You cut them in half. You can just dispose of them. But you're right. You have to regulate and make sure that, you're optimized for your hearing. But that is one thing I just haven't found a better solution for.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not an option for a lot of people, but finding somewhere quiet. But even then, if you've got a partner in bed and they're, going up to the toilet or rolling around, then you're still going to get the issue with noise. Now, one thing I do is I use white noise. So I have a white noise generator and I put that up quite loud. And I had
a hardware version rather than an app, yeah?
I used to have a hardware version, which was awesome, but it didn't travel so well. And one of the big things for me is traveling and moving around a lot. So I actually bought a little, it's an electronic version, but it's not, it doesn't like take it from the phone or anything. It's not a speaker. It's just it's all within it. It's got the noise within it. And I found that hugely effective. So I just put that on. It took me a while to get the volume up, but once I did that, it was absolutely awesome. So I do highly recommend that. And as we go to talk about temperature and stuff, a fan is also a good option to produce, I suppose, essentially mechanical white noise, and also cool you. And then certainly when I was in the UK, I used to have my windows open a lot to try and cool the room. You don't really have air conditioning in the UK. And that then brought noise in. So it's kind of this balance of, as much as you can, controlling the light, controlling the noise, controlling the temperature without having to sleep in a pod or, dig a bunker underground.
That sleeping in the pod, that won't be good for your marriage, would it? Like you sleep in separate rooms for your partner, Quick one here. Owen Burrows says, took the TV out of the bedroom and it was the number one thing I believe that helped me improve my sleep pattern. Very true. Having TV on before bed, especially, it depends on the distance as well and what type of TV you got in your room. But yeah, that definitely I'd say plays a part. Matt Parker says, hey guys, Timber reference was me. Sorry, steam arms playing up. Quick question. I suffer from night anxiety issues and sometimes awake after 15 minutes of sleep, especially post having Lyme disease. Have you got any advice for a decent night's sleep? I do try to meditate and cut out caffeine and sugar. Any advice taken? Cheers. Again, great topic. So we're kind of, Matt, we're covering this, if you like, at the moment and trying to pick those apart via my vehicle of explaining the rituals that I have in place. So what other things would you suggest based on that criteria that I gave you?
So we've spoken about noise. We've spoken about earplugs, white noise. That's quite a good option. Quiet a room as you can. Next, eye mask. Darkness is so important, and actually conversely, waking up to light can be super powerful. Difficult with natural light because it varies over the year, but like a Lumi alarm clock again can be a useful adjunct, a useful tool to have. And another thing I use actually is a daylight lamp. So if I am waking up, again, this was a problem when I was in the UK. If I am waking up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or even later in the winter, there's not going to be sunlight for 3 hours. Whereas if I turn the lamp on 20 centimeters away for 20 minutes, then I'm getting that full dose of daylight, which resets my hormones, suppresses my melatonin, and my body's like, right, I'm ready to go. And if I can get that at 6 a.m. whenever I wake up, then that means my body is now counting down to bedtime. Whereas if I didn't have that, I wouldn't get that stimulation until maybe midday or even later if I don't leave the house.
I've got a lamp called a Spurter lamp, Spurter lamp, and it's the only FDA approved lamp. It's bought it from the States, about $600-700, including shipping. And it's the only FDA approved lamp, and it's for vitamin D. So you had that for 4 to 5 minutes every other day. And I had that in the winter because, again, it's about regulation. The only problem with those, again, is like with vitamin D, you don't get full spectrum. So you get parts of it. So you still need to kind of supplement, but that helps with the regulation as well. But going back to what you said, I like to get out first thing in the morning and let the dog out first thing. And I try and get the sun on my eyes as well. A friend of the show, Ash Thompson, was talking to me about earthing is another thing that you can do. Get out with shoes off. That works especially well for when you travel somewhere and you've got jet lag. Get out on the grass and start to that. But I totally agree. I used to have one of those lamps that you just spoke of. You can buy them off Amazon for like 30 or 40 pounds. They're called SAD lamps, and they season deficient order. Was it seasonal
affective disorder?
Affective disorder. That's it. Yeah. So I took it up one step to increase the vitamin D. But we'll talk about this next week. And I've always wanted to live outside of the UK and spend times in the sunshine. And when my daughter leaves school, we will be doing that because I think that's another great way of regulating things. But sorry, go on, Karen.
Yeah, no, for sure. You know what? Like for the last 2.5 years, I've done exactly that. I've had 20 minutes in the midday sun, usually somewhere near the equator, and it's the like night and day for my health, my mood, my productivity, everything. And just an interesting point there. I've got clients as a health coach all over the world, and they all say to me, my vitamin D is fine. I live in Hawaii. I live in Mexico. I live in Thailand. And I say, look, I know you do, but you work at a computer. So you probably don't get outside as much as you think you do. Just test it. Invariably, none of them are optimal. So one option, get out into the sun. Other option, supplement vitamin D. And I've not heard of those lamps which you mentioned, but that sounds like a third option as well.
I'll share a link while we're chatting, I'll share this into the group here. Called a Spurty lamp. Carry on, mate. While you're telling us about the next step, I'm going to pull up this lamp and then I can share it into the chat for you as well. Yeah,
for sure. So, you know, that's fundamental. The vitamin D test is super simple to get. There's companies in the UK, there's companies in the US. Most of the world, you can get a vitamin D test super easy. If in doubt, test it and you can optimize it from there. So darkness, really, really important. And actually mentioning the TV, so that's a whole different thing. But if you do have LEDs in your room, cover them up, just put a sticker over them. The air conditioning is a classic one because you can't generally remove the air conditioning, and I find air conditioning a positive for sleep. So I have stickers, thick stickers. I stick them over the LED. But if you can, ideally remove stuff. So radios. Who has radios these days? Alarm clocks. So the Lumi alarm clocks, actually, the number disappears when you set it, which is great. TVs just don't have that stuff. And on top of that, a huge part of sleep is routine. So if you're spending the day, here you go. Oh, there we go. That's what I was about to show. Let me put this back on screen. So this is the lamp I'm talking about. It's £400 and 33 pence, then delivery. So about $700. Look, FDA cleared, proven clinical study, 5 minutes of use every day, 1,000 hours of light bulb time, 7-year product warranty and stuff. So you can see here where people are, stands in front of the lamp for a part of the day. And I found that does work, especially when it comes to winter time. I mean, it's not the best looking thing in the world, but you can hang that in your dressing room or wherever you are in the house and just put that on. You've got a set of goggles that go with it, but that is probably the next best thing from getting real sunlight in those winter months, or, you know, you travel. So yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah, no, for sure. I'll look into that. That's really interesting. So routine and sleep, super important. In that regard, try to avoid doing other things in the bedroom. Try to avoid working in the bedroom. Try to avoid watching TV in the bedroom, because your body, you almost have to treat it like an animal. The animal wants to, you know, you put your dog to bed and you expect him to sleep. Like, he gets into the habit of when he is in bed, he's sleeping. If you start playing with him in bed, you're going to have problems. So try and keep your bedroom. I'm a huge fan of this. I have all different rooms for different things. Try and keep the bedroom for sleeping. It helps with so many things. And as you mentioned, just going back to light again, if you can, again, if the bedroom is just for sleeping, it doesn't need to be a super well-lit room. It doesn't matter if you've got blackout blinds stuck to the windows, because you can go out to do the rest of the things. Curtains, without the blinds behind them, they don't tend to work because the light comes around them. So you kind of need something flush with the window. And eye masks work, but I find sometimes I get breakouts, especially if I don't wash the mask regularly. So for me, I don't know if I'm just oily. It could be that, to be honest. But I have a mask for the morning. I don't tend to wear it all night, but in the morning I just put it on for the last 2 hours. And it usually helps me with the last couple of hours sleep. So that's kind of noise and light.
Yes.
Covered. So it's exactly what you said. I try not use things on me because I find I have issues with them. But it's better to be silent, actually get a night's sleep than use earplugs a night for a night or whatever.
What about in terms of, like I mentioned earlier, like magnesium? Either I will supplement with magnesium citrate before bed. I have no issues going off to sleep. It's the way, like I speak to Ash Thompson, who's a regular on the show.
Oh, I know.
He has problems going off to sleep more so than the waking up part. The waking up part will be a bit tough for him, but he's going off to sleep, and I don't really suffer from that. But it's that waking up religiously at 4:30 every day can drive you mad, especially if you propose to like have a day off. Does that make sense? So you can get up, you can meditate and do all these things, and there are times where I might get up and go back to sleep, but I don't always feel like going back to sleep. And then the day kicks in, and then you're going to be on the back foot. So I tend to do that, and then you feel tired towards the end of the day. So what other supplements do you experiment with helping with sleep? Ashwagandha, what?
Yeah, so magnesium is an interesting one. I mean, certainly, in ZMA, zinc, magnesium, vitamin B6, I think it is, aspartate. People use that for sleep. Again, you can get that tested. You can get your magnesium levels tested. You can supplement them if you need to. You can get them actually through IV drips as well. I used to do, as a doctor, it used to be one of my businesses, which was interesting. So I would recommend getting it tested. And ultimately, as I said at the beginning, look, if you take magnesium, if you have a magnesium bath and it works, like as part of your routine, keep doing it. Don't break what doesn't work.
Happens, it makes me sleepy. But then I don't know, because I'm not a doctor, a scientist, or whatever. With magnesium, is if you have a bit too much, does that actually upset the apple cart and then wakes you? Like when you can find it, it's like it works for a period of time. Like some people will drink alcohol and then they'll wake up a few hours later, their body's dehydrated. You'd expect all that, and so that will wake them up because it gives them disruptive sleep. I'm wondering whether if you've already got good levels of magnesium and you haven't measured them, and then you take more magnesium as a supplement, does that have diminishing returns,
Yeah, so quite possibly, if you're deficient in magnesium and you take it up to a good level, that will be beneficial, no doubt. At that point, it might be that you've established this ritual, so you're getting benefit from just taking it. Now, I don't think there's any harm in taking too much. I mean, obviously, if you're downing the bottle of pills, you're going to have issues, and if you take too much, it can be laxative as well. So you'll know if you're going too far with that.
Definitely, without a doubt. So in terms of so we cover quite a lot here. Let's look at the impact of sleep, or like the detrimental effects if you don't get it. Like you said, is that entrepreneurs wear a badge of honor. A lot of people sit in front of their computer all day getting a Microsoft tan. They're unhealthy. They don't realize they're unhealthy. They're not operating like normal humans would do. We've moved into this age where we're surrounded by lights, and not very good lights, computers, machinery, EMFs, all those kind of things. Let's look at the impact on mental health, all these things that happen if you just simply don't get enough sleep.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is honestly that podcast with Matthew Walker and Joe Rogan, hugely recommended. But basically, you can split it into two kind of areas. One is the short-term effects and then the long-term effects. And in terms of the short-term effects, some of the information is if you have one poor night of sleep, then productivity, focus, athletic performance, memory, all of these different things will suffer measurably. People have checked it. And I'm sure there was one fact. It was like one poor night's sleep is the same or worse than being drunk. So night shift workers who are driving after a shift, if they haven't slept the day before, is the same as being drunk. And obviously the implications for that as healthcare workers who are working and saving lives under the influence of lack of sleep, that's pretty catastrophic. And then long term, I mean, you have issues with mood, you have issues with low mood, depression, things like that. You have issues with increased anxiety, and then increased risk factors for pretty much all diseases. And personally, the one which terrified me the most was dementia, Alzheimer's, that kind of thing. And I'm just like, that was the thing which tipped it for me. I was like, right, I'm a night shift worker. I work most of my shifts are night shifts because it allowed me to do stuff in the day. It's like double productivity, ridiculous. And I heard that and I was like, I'm out. That's not worth it. Like losing my brain, losing my mental capacity. If I can reduce the risk by sleeping at night.
No, that makes sense. And in terms of athletic performance as well, like you work with people on nutrition and obviously performance, like with athletes. Do you work with anyone who has to cut weight or anything like that?
No, so I don't tend to work with athletes, to be honest. I like doing that stuff myself. I've done many sports, but the people I work with tend to be real life people who run businesses and just want to be healthier around their current lifestyle. So there is a performance aspect, but it's less, hitting a 40-yard dash or a bench press, and more, productivity goals and just getting stronger and fitter, that kind of thing.
Well, the other thing with weight as well, you retain weight when your weight control is bad. If you've got poor sleep, even if you're training as hard as you can train and trying to go into, say, fat loss, that's difficult, isn't it? Because it almost like your body's in shock, so it holds on to it. So it can be counterproductive. Like you can gain weight through lack of sleep, and equally it's harder to reduce your weight if you wanted to, not like go on a diet or you change your lifestyle. If your sleep's not regulated, it's going to be very, very difficult to get the rest of that timber off, isn't it?
100%. And so this is one of the dumb experiments that I did, on purpose or not. When I was working these night shifts, it was three or four shifts a week. So most of the week was sleep disrupted, and I was trying to compete as a bodybuilder. So trying to get to crazy low levels of body fat while my sleep was all over the place. It's possible. You can do it through brute force and abuse of physiology. However, it is infinitely more difficult, and everything is against you. When you lack sleep, you crave poorer food, shitter food. Am I allowed to swear?
Of course you can.
You crave poorer quality food. You crave piles of carbs. Your appetite regulation is off. And you crave more of it, and there's no kind of off switch. So you're more likely to eat more food. You have much less willpower to stay on track. You're less motivated to exercise. You're more motivated to be lazy. So you can brute force past all of that, use willpower to not overeat and whatever else, which is what I ended up doing. But, with my clients, like, sleep is such a fundamental priority, because this shouldn't be a constant battle of willpower, because you won't succeed long term doing it like that. You need to optimize your environment, sleep included, and you need to make this a game of choice. Like, you choose to eat healthy because it makes you feel better. So sleep is fundamental. You can brute force past it, but don't recommend it.
What do you think about, there's people out there that sleep in stretches, like, so they don't do their night sleep. They do like an hour and then a gap, then another hour, but if you tip the balance the wrong way, it goes all over the place. But I can't remember the terminology, but people actually try and practice that, don't they? They sleep less per day, but they sleep in little stretches, like any little sprints.
Yeah, so there's two variations of that, actually. It's interesting you bring that up. So there's biphasic sleep, which is sleeping in 2 4-hour blocks. And it's kind of usually, I think it's between like 10 and 2 in the morning, and then I think early afternoon, something like that. And then, but you're still sleeping 8 hours for sake of argument. And then there's polyphasic sleep, which is what you're talking about, where you sleep, I think, literally like an hour and a half all day, long term. It's crazy. And I've read a lot about it, because obviously productivity, hustle, and all this kind of stuff. I don't know that I would want to try it. I'm too worried about the health implications, and obviously not many people have done it, so we don't know much about it. But with my current level of what I understand about sleep, I would be very wary to do it. Certainly not for a long-term experiment, but it's possible. I mean, if someone's crazy and wants to give it a shot, crack on. But
no, that doesn't kind of bode with me. I'd prefer, I long for the days where I go past 6.5 hours, but is it optimal? Is like, say 7 to 8 hours sleep. Sometimes you can oversleep. How do you find that baseline of the requirement other than how you feel in yourself? Is 6.5 hours good or bad? Is it half an hour off? Because some people need 7, some people need 8. So I'm like almost 30 minutes away, but generally it can be very early in the morning. It's like once you then start work, it's great for productivity because you get a shit ton of work done. By the time the phone rings, gone 9 o'clock, you've done a day's work. But then you don't, by the afternoon, you're exhausted. It's like you get 5, 6 o'clock, you're tired because you think that equates to someone doing 10 o'clock till 6, starts work at 9 and works 9 till 5. But if you wake up and you work for yourself and you're at your desk at say 4:30 in the morning, that's a long, long way to get to 5:30, 6 at the other end of the day. So you're doing 12, 13-hour days. So there's that there as well, isn't it? And if you sleep at different times to the family, because they would sleep in 2 or 3 hours longer, then go to bed after you as well. It's just trying to find that equilibrium. Yeah,
for sure. So this is where Matthew Walker, the sleep guy, he says you need 7.5 hours. If you sleep less than that, you're going to die. And I'm like, whoa. It's not, I don't think it's quite as crazy as that. I think there's more gray. And, people have debunked a lot of what he said and said, look, there is more gray. So where I stand is, look, sleep is super important, but figure out what works for you. So I would say, look, if you're functioning well on 6.5 hours, then great. Now, you might be able to optimize that a little bit further. For example, going to bed at 8:30 you might feel like a different person, or having a half-hour nap at midday.
That's what I do. I have a nap or meditate I have YouTube on and play something. I don't sit and meditate. I lay down. So when I get tired, I try and tie in the both of them. So generally throughout the day at some point, I'll have a 30-minute nap. It's actually you turn on meditation and then 20 minutes later, 25 minutes later, when the meditation's done, you kind of woke up. But I find that is really good for a reset for the afternoon. For some reason, like you start to get diminishing returns after a period of time working because you've got your deep work that you can do. And then after that, the effect goes down and down. Decision making becomes, say, a bit more poorer, etc. But that little boost you get for the afternoon, that 20-minute, that ideal 20, 30 minutes, some people don't like to go over 20 because it makes them more tired, etc. But it's almost like, okay, that should give my brain like a reset, if you like, or like a refresh. So it gives you a little bit more time to be more compos mentis and do more of that work in the afternoon, like the more focused stuff,
Loads of evidence for that, and loads of anecdotal evidence. Loads of people who say 20 minutes and they feel incredible. So I would even systematize that and just say, you feel better if you have that 20-minute nap. So make it happen,
Yeah.
For
so
sure.
what's your current regime that you would suggest for Amazon sellers listening at the moment, as we're coming up to the 40-minute mark? I'll run through these quickly again so people can make notes at the end of the show. So wax-based earplugs, but be careful. Like what you said is you don't want to end up pushing it down into your ear and any problems there. Reduce the room temperature. You said to use it like a fan as well, because you've got like the white noise aspect of it. Sleep in little clothing or loose clothing, but not so loose that when you turn over, it makes it uncomfortable and you pull on the clothing. Eye mask and blackout blinds, both if you can. If not, eye mask is the start in the right direction. Supplementation, magnesium, or soak via the skin by having a magnesium bath. That can set the tone for the evening. Air purifier, taking molecules out the air and regenerating good clean air, even if you can't see what's going on. Airplane mode on your mobile to reduce EMFs. You don't want your phone put right next to your bed with it still on because of radiation or etc. there. Remove any blue light. That should be a given. adjust the brightness control on your mobile device, or if better, don't have it in the room where possible. No heavy meals before bed, because you've got to digest that could make it uncomfortable. If you are going to snack, you might want to experiment with that, because you might have regulation issues with blood sugars, and that might be a result for you if you get it right. You might add the spoon of honey, and that's the one that takes you through. You never know. Or a boiled egg because of the protein, etc. No caffeine 6 hours before bed. No late night working in front of the screen where possible. You want to turn that off 3 or 4 hours before bed. And no heavy workouts. Now, I don't do heavy workouts. Talk to me about the training aspect now, like overtraining. That has an impact on sleep as well, because the stresses on the body.
Yeah. So with training, my kind of rule of thumb is, a training session will amp you up, and the heavier it is, the more intense it is, the more you're going to get amped up. Obviously doing some yoga is pretty chill, but doing, 5 rep max bench press is going to pump you up.
Yeah.
The heavier the session, the longer gap you need before bed.
Yeah.
And be aware of pre-workouts. If you're smashing a load of, energy drinks and you're training at 8 p.m., you're going to have real issues.
Yeah.
So with training, it's definitely a case of the more intense the workout, just bring it further back before bed. And again, just see what happens. If you find you do a workout at 6 and you're still amped up at 10, you need to move it back further. But find what works or what doesn't work for you. And just a point on caffeine, actually. So the half-life of caffeine is 6 hours. So if you have 300 milligrams of caffeine, in 6 hours, you've still got 150 milligrams. So I would even say stop caffeine earlier, especially if you're having issues with sleep. 6 hours before bed, say bed at 10 o'clock would be 4 p.m. If you're having issues with sleep, knock it back to midday. And even then, the amount you have, obviously, if you have 1,000 milligrams by midday, you've still got 500 by 6 o'clock, and you've still got 300 by midnight, which is like a large, which is like a large Costa at midnight, smashing that back. So just be aware that caffeine, especially if you're sensitive to it, is an obvious one that people kind of forget about.
Yeah. And what about muscle recovery as well? Because that plays an important role. Sleep's going to help repair muscle tears and stress, isn't it?
Yeah, sleep is super, super important. If you're training hard, if you're on a hard training block, you might need more sleep. And that's absolutely fine. Allow your body for that. Even if you say, okay, so I'm fine on 6.5 hours. If you suddenly start training for a marathon or, whatever, allow that your body may need more, 7.5, 8.5. Just let it happen. If you deny that, then you're going to struggle. Your recovery is going to be stunted.
Yeah. And what about injuries and stuff? Lack of sleep, pushing your body too hard through exercise? Because some people want to go and have a run each day, and then they're not recovering. And then if they're running at night and they're getting off to sleep later, they're not getting their length of sleep, and that all start to have diminishing returns as well, right?
Yeah. And, even on the most basic, in the most basic way, if you lack sleep, then you're more likely to get injured. The increased, there's just a massively increased chance of injury, and you're going to recover from injuries much slower. So yeah, it's super, super important.
Cool. Tiff's got a question here. What does he think about melatonin? It's a good question.
Awesome question. So I'm a huge fan of melatonin. Now, the way it works is you get a melatonin spike at night, which is encouraged by darkness, coolness, and things getting quiet. So this is what you want to try and nurture. Now, if you're struggling to get those, for example, with jet lag, so melatonin helps you define this rhythm. If that rhythm is disrupted, then melatonin is super, super powerful to fix it. So for example, with jet lag, if you obviously fly 6 hours, 12 hours and cross that many time zones, your natural melatonin is going to really, really struggle. So for that, melatonin can be very, very helpful. Now, whether it's helpful for normal kind of, I'm struggling to sleep, going to try some melatonin, is slightly more up for debate. What I would say is, if you try it and it helps you, great. Would
you say start with microdosing with melatonin first? Could it be quite hard on you if you like go with the general side, like normally you use them for jet lag? I'm not sure. I don't think you can get melatonin in the UK. I normally buy it when I'm on the road.
You can't get it in the UK, no.
Yeah.
I start with a small dose for sure. And actually start with the environment. Start with darkness and light in the morning. So exactly as you said about grounding helps with jet lag, being outside helps with jet lag. So if you arrive at your destination and you wake up the next morning, try and get into the sunlight to kind of hard reset your body clock. It'll still take time. Your circadian rhythm, exactly. It'll still take time, but it'll be quicker. And then what I tend to do is I start taking, I almost lead into my jet lag with melatonin at the kind of the destination time, even a few days before I arrive. And then I use it at the location time for, again, about a week or so on arrival.
Yeah. And what is it, the current thing there with terms of melatonin? You know, when you fly, is it for every hour crossed in terms of time zone goes towards a day of recovery? So let's say you fly from New York to the UK, it's 7 hours. So to get back into the zone and get into regularity of sleep and circadian rhythm is back on your regular time zone. Is it would say 7 hours would be equate to 7 days?
So it's the number of time zones you cross. So I don't know what it is with it. It's 5 hours between us and New
is it
York
5
right now.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So it's not the length of the flight; it's the number of time zones. But yeah, that's also what I've heard.
Yeah.
But you can, for want of a better word, you can hack that by kind of starting in the kind of lead up to the flight, preempt the jet lag, and start thinking about destination time zone. And then as soon as you get on the plane, change your clock to the destination time zone. Start using melatonin and start kind of trying to manipulate your light accordingly. So if you arrive, at 9 in the morning at your destination, stay awake until.
Yeah. Well, another thing I was told as well is fasting as well when you fly is then eat at the new location, which will be helpful. Elchin's got a question here. Hi all, is there any minimum time for sleep? Most say minimum 7 to 8 hours. I'm sleeping 6 hours. I think you meant to say now. It seems okay for me and napping sometimes. I'm the same. I'm 6.5 and I nap in a day, but ideally, out of choice, I'd like to go to bed a little bit later and wake up at the same time as the family. 6 o'clock or 5's okay for me. I just think 4's a bit of a stretch. I prefer to sneak in that extra hour. I think that would give me good returns if I was managed to do that.
Yeah, so that morning wake up time is the anchor, as in that's the bit that your body gets very, very used to. So yeah, you can retrain it, but it's going to be the hardest thing to retrain. And actually, when people want to start sleeping better, then the morning anchor is what I say is like, right, let's work out what time you want to wake up. Now start waking up at that time every day, and let's work backwards from there to figure out your bedtime. Because once you have it established, it's hard to budge, which is what you're experiencing right now. And this is where Matthew Walker says, if you sleep less than 7.5 hours, then you're going to die. I think
we're all going to die sometime.
Well,
we're all going to have an expiry date, but yeah.
So I think, to be honest, it's more flexible than that. But what I would be wary of doing is saying I'm okay with 6 hours sleep, and it's just assuming that you are. Because I slept for a long time for 4 hours, and I was okay. Clearly, I wasn't. I just didn't know what really okay felt like. So I would give yourself the opportunity for a week or two on vacation or whatever to sleep as much as you can and see how much sleep you get in. If you're sleeping 8 hours daily on vacation and only 6 hours at home, then actually 8 hours might be nearer to your true time. You're just struggling to sleep at home. So that's a test that you can do.
So for benefit for the people listening, this would be my last question before we wrap. What about these people that feel that they need a stack of sleep, like they sleep 8 or 9 hours and then they still feel all like exhausted when they wake up? What should they do?
That's really interesting. I mean, so if someone is sleeping 8 or 9 hours and feels amazing, then they need to sleep 8 or 9 hours. That's fine. Good for them. If someone sleeps 8 or 9 hours and is still really struggling, then that is potentially something more going on. I mean, again, my area of expertise, I would say, right, let's make sure nutrition is nailed. Let's make sure exercise is nailed. Let's make sure sleep and stress are nailed. Once we've done all these things, ideally alongside, you can start investigating and doing blood tests, seeing various specialists and looking into more stuff. But to me, until you've got these basics nailed down, these are the obvious things. For example, if you're not managing any exercise in the day, that might make your sleep deeper. So you might be more recovered. If you're using alcohol or weed, for example, that will give you poorer quality sleep. So let's rule out the basics. If everything is perfect, you're sleeping 9 hours and are still exhausted. All right, now let's look further and seek medical assistance.
Yeah. Juan says, excellent session, Danny. I love all these tips. Well, basically, Emil is feeding back on all the tips, but I'm glad that you are enjoying the show. Is there anything you want to add before we go, mate?
Earlier you asked what I would recommend Amazon entrepreneurs do for sleep. And I would say the single biggest thing you can do is probably charge your phone out of the room. As a symbolic thing more than anything else, because we run our businesses on our phones, and having it next to your head, you want to check it. You want to see if what the sales are or if an emails come in. So just have it outside. It solves so many problems. And then apart from that, just nail the light, the noise, and the light, noise, and what's the last one? Coolness, temperature. And then you can go down the rabbit hole and go biohacking and geeking out and love that kind of stuff. Nail the basics, charge your phone outside your room, everything else will fall into place.
Sounds good. What's the best way people can reach you for consultancy work, training, etc.?
Yeah, so best bet, honestly, we're on Facebook. Emil Goliath, add me on Facebook, drop me a message. I'm very, very active on there most days, and I like talking about this stuff. So even if it's just a question, just drop me a DM. I'll talk about it. And if you want to go further, then that's fine. I'm happy with that as well. Cool.
Sounds good. I'll be back here again tomorrow, 4 p.m. BST. Dr. Ellis Whitehead, my partner in data, will be here. We'll be doing some stuff on PPC. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to be doing a double bill celebration, half century of Seller Sessions. So the podcast by Tuesday will be the 500th episode. And I'm going to have rotation of 30 plus guests over 2 days coming in, asking specific questions. So Tuesday is a big milestone for us. We started in 2017, so that will take us up to 500 episodes. So make sure that you tune in for that. Other than that, stay home if you can. Stay safe. Look after your family, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.